Hello. This is a teaching vignette for my students of literature and literary facing or literature associated undergraduate degrees, and for anyone else who wants to listen to this. It's just about critical analysis. So oftentimes we'll get feedback on your essays, and your lecturers may well be asking you for more critical analysis, to provide more critical commentary, to provide a more critical approach, to develop your critical voice, or to develop your critical argument. Now, critical analysis is a key aspect of literary studies and studies in the humanities that you'll develop throughout your degree. Some of you may have encountered it in your previous studies, but sometimes students get confused about the notion of, how do I develop the skills of critical analysis, and what is it my lecturers mean by that? And of course, that's a good question. Critical analysis as it relates to essay writing, particularly within literary studies, does have a certain set of skills that we need to develop, and that perhaps we won't be doing in our everyday life. But that will be specifically applied to the writing of essays. What perhaps will relate to everyday life and to life in general and lots of our jobs is this phrase critical thinking, and there are lots of really interesting resources about critical thinking that I'll put in the link. I've put in the description to this video. But when we're asking you for critical analysis, essentially we're developing notions of critical thinking and applying them to how you might write an essay. So critical analysis or critical commentary, or developing your critical voice or your critical argument, is essentially developing your understanding, and thereafter you're developing instincts of the necessity to explain and expand upon links between ideas, and explain, reflect, and expand upon links between specific ideas and the main point or points you're making in particular paragraphs, and then more generally to your argument, to your main argument of a whole. As I've said, there's lots of resources online and in books about critical thinking and descriptions and outlines of those things. And as I've said, I put some of those in the description for you. But as I said, critical thinking tools can be retooled to think about what you need to do to cultivate when you're developing critical analytical writing skills. So in a little nutshell, really, critical thinking can be translated in terms of your essay writing practice as reflective thinking. Critical writing and analysis can be also translated or rethought about as reflective writing and analysis. For example, there's a useful website called Critical Thinking Web, one of numerous that comes up, but this is quite a useful resource that I found, and again, the description, I've put a link to this in the description, and it outlines sort of main critical thinking skills. The first two of these are, for example, understanding. Critical thinking, first thing, is to understand the logical connections between ideas. So to repurpose that into thinking about how you might develop skills for your essays, that's essentially demonstrating your understanding of the logical connections between ideas, demonstrating your understanding of the logical connection between ideas. And those might be the ideas of authors that you cite, writers that you cite, or your own ideas. So demonstrating the logical connections between ideas. The second skill they identify as part of critical thinking is identifying and constructing and evaluating arguments. Identifying, constructing, and evaluating arguments. In terms of critical writing, how this critical thinking idea might be applied to your critical writing, identification means quoting from and arranging, selecting relevant quotations, relevant ideas that will be relevant to your argument. Constructing those ideas essentially means using these ideas, but also making these ideas part of your argument. And evaluating these things means essentially testing these ideas that you have taken from. So as I said, if you look at resources on critical thinking, what you need to then say is, oh, how do I then reflect on and apply those to my critical writing and analyses? So to reiterate, when you're giving feedback about you need to develop your critical voice, your critical commentary, your critical argument, what essentially we're saying is you need to demonstrate in writing your reflective capacities and your critical reflection on a range of different ideas. So for example, if you use quotations from sources, what you need to do is you need to reflect on them, and you need to develop your instinct to say, okay, I've used this quotation or I've quoted from a poem. What I need to do in my piece is to reflect on that and demonstrate that I'm thinking critically about how these particular quotations relate to the specific point I'm making at that particular time. So essentially, breaking down the notion of critical thinking is essentially stepping back, reflecting, expanding, and making sure you're clear that you understand these ideas and how these ideas might relate to your essay. As I say, I put a lot of useful outlines in the description to this video, and please do pursue those. And also there are a number of resources in your library to reflect on critical thinking in general, and critical reflection, critical commentary, analytical writing, reflective writing in specific. And as I say, the critical thinking and critical writing are interchangeable in the sense of one applies to the other, and the skills of critical thinking can be retooled to think about the skills of reflective writing. As a footnote to this, critical thinking should not necessarily be confused with critical theory, which is a different different kettle of fish, a different bag of beans, a different thing entirely. Critical theory was developed specifically by the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 1940s. And that's something else to think about. But of course, the critical theorists do rely on their advanced capacity of critical thinking to tackle political, ideological, etc. ideas. Anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do pursue those links and enjoy.